7 o'clock Thursday night in Hammond, Wisconsin. It can only mean one thing. It's time for a live stream. There are already a boatload of questions queued up, so we're not going to do any song and dance here tonight. I do want to thank our new sponsor, Titebond Glue, for helping to underwrite the cost and helping to bring you live. So please support our sponsor. Here we go.
There we go.
Or please support our sponsor. That's what I meant to say. All right.
George, our first question comes from John. He has your DVDs, specifically the complete woodworking video collection, but would like to know what finish you use on your lidded box and on your bowls.
Turning projects, I'm guessing. And I'm going to apologize in advance for my voice. I'm still getting over a cold, so hopefully the Gatorade will chase that. Two primary finishes for turning for me. Get a zoom out of you here, Krista. Commercially made finish, the one on my left, your right, this Mylands finish. It's available on Amazon from a bunch of other suppliers. Mylands is a friction polish, and boy, I wish I had something on the lathe I could quickly show you how well this stuff works. You put it on, and then while the lathe is running, you apply. I always use a paper towel for finishing, not a rag. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, you apply friction while it's running, and it really polishes up. It's amazing. If you want to make a finish instead of buy a finish, look at this one. See how it's settled out? This is actually a 3-part mix. It's 1/3 mineral spirits, 1/3 linseed oil, and 1/3 shellac. So you're seeing all 3 components are in there right now. You're only seeing 2 of them because 2 of them mix together and the other one settles out. So when you're going to use this, you shake, 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 and then apply that. It doesn't provide quite the gloss that the Mylands does, but I like this finish a lot because I can shop make it. I don't have to buy it. All 3 ingredients readily available from a store. The recipe again, 1/3 linseed oil, 1/3 mineral spirits, not mineral oil, and 1/3 shellac. Hit it.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I was going to go back. So the reason a paper towel, not a rag, when you're putting finish on the lathe is if commonly when you put finish on, the piece is turning. If you're using a rag and it's wrapped around your hand at all and that rag catches, it's probably going to break a finger because you're going to get pulled into the turning. If you apply your finish with a paper towel and it catches, it's just going to tear and you're going to be okay. So you should always apply lathe finishes with a paper towel, not a rag.
All right, thanks, George. Bob wants to know, should he mortise the leg on a table before or after he cuts the taper? Before.
It's easiest to, it's going to be easiest to work with the leg when it's still lineal, when it's still straight, and get your joints in there, get your mortise in there, and then do the taper after the fact.
All right. John wants to know, different John, by the way, okay.
John was the name of record on the last one. There were about 20 questions from Johns.
John recently bought some new sandpaper, we're not going to mention the brand, that had a sticky back to it that is advertised as making sanding easier and no slip. However, he used it on his palm sander.
Well, what is easier and no slip is what it says?
Yeah, like it's advertised as being easier to use and not slippery.
I don't know what that means.
Anyways, he used it on his palm sander, and when the piece wore out, he peeled it off to replace it, and it took some of the sander rubber pad with it. The pad was heated, as was the paper, and it formed a very tough bond. Have you ever experienced this, and did he do something wrong?
It ain't you, it's the system. So self-adhesive sandpaper is commonly listed as PSA, pressure-sensitive adhesive, and I'm confident I have sanders in my shop that are basically ruined because peeling off the PSA takes so much of the rubber with it. Part of what you can try to do to avoid that is not overheating the abrasive. So overheating is going to come from using, maybe leaning on the sander, which you shouldn't do anyway. Maybe change the paper more frequently. But the bottom line is hook and loop, which we would call Velcro. Hook and loop systems are so much better for this reason. It's so much easier to get paper on and off. If you take off a hook and loop paper and set it aside, and you want to put it back on, you're going to be able to do that. If you take off a PSA paper and set it aside, it's almost impossible to get it to stick again. So what you're talking about, I've primarily experienced in turning classes where I've got some sanding discs that are PSA for sanding bowls. And when students use them, if they really lean on them or if they use them too long, they'll overheat like that and they're nearly impossible to get off. So it's not you, it's the system. It's just PSA on on electric sanders is not a great system.
Okay. Troy has a question. He builds a lot of raised panel cabinet doors using red oak. He uses miter corners with biscuits. He says, I noticed that the cut quality that I'm getting on these joints is very good. It turns out to be a smooth, shiny finish. He hasn't had any issues yet, but wonders, is he losing any mechanical strength with the smooth joints in regards to glue penetration, or are the biscuits doing all the hard work? Should he go to a rougher cut blade? He's using an 80 tooth ATB blade, 2-degree negative hook.
So what his question really is the wood on the miters so smooth that the glue is not going to have the opportunity to bond? It's great that you're putting a biscuit in there because that's going to add so much mechanical strength to it. I'm going to say, I think you're okay. Think about if we're doing a long grain joint edge to edge and we've jointed both of those edges. And when you feel those in a hardwood, a maple or something like that, a maple, walnut, cherry, when you feel those edges, they can really feel just silky smooth. But we glue those edges together and expect that edge to edge glue up to hold. The question is interesting because the more common complaint with miters is that because of the porosity of the end grain in a miter joint, that the glue soaks into the pores and you're compromising glue strength. So I think because of the fact that you've got a good smooth cut and you're supplementing that with the mechanical strength of a biscuit, I think you're going to be fine. Now, if you really want to nail this down, here's what I would do. Use your existing blade. So the blade he was describing, ATB, that's alternate top bevel, negative 2-degree hook. That means the tooth leans away from the cut 2 degrees. Great blade choice. So what I would do is just do one corner, assemble the way you always do, 80 tooth blade, biscuit, glue it together. Set that aside. Put a different blade in your saw. Put a 60 tooth blade in your saw. I think my miter saw has a 40 tooth blade in it. Try a different blade, glue it together with the biscuit, and then fracture both joints. And you don't have to measure it. You can just kind of wishbone it and see if one fractures noticeably sooner than the other and go from there. That'd be a really cool experiment.
Thanks, George. Joel has a question. He wants to know if you have any suggestions for a cart for his benchtop drill press.
Well, let's make a move Thursday, I guess, because the answer is yes, Joel. Let me think. Yeah, the best way is going to be to go to this one. There's a couple of them in here, but let's have it in this direction. As some musical group once said, walk this way. And stupidly, I can't remember who that is. I'm sure Krista knows.
Aerosmith.
All right. Are you on this gizmo?
Yep.
All right. The cabinet down here, yeah, if you could tilt down, I think. I'm so far from the camera, I can't see. I think you got to sneak in a little bit because it's going to make the audio kind of. I know the farther we are from that mic, the hinkier the audio gets. Now I see where you are. Okay. This cabinet is specifically built for benchtop tools, and this is on the WWGOA site. When I'm all done with this, one of the things I do is I go through and I answer all the questions. So for this question, I'll put the link to this project in the answer. But it's pretty cool. I'm really happy with the design. It's made out of 3/4 inch AC plywood. The whole project came out of one piece of plywood. In addition to the case, there are these full extension drawers in here. So I used to have my benchtop drill press on here. And then I got the floor mount drill press, and now I've got a benchtop router table on here. The other thing that's pretty cool, I think, and it took me quite a bit of figuring to get this, but let me see if I can pivot toward you and show you, because I think this is a cool feature. Big bang. On the sides, I built into it these thingies. There, all right. Easy for me to say. I built into it these supports. The premise with this was that if you have, say, a drill press on here, there's one of these on each side, and you can use this as ancillary support for whatever you're doing. And the reason they look like this is to make sure that you can cock this a little bit to level it with the table. So whether you're using this as a planer stand or a drill press stand, or in this case, a router table stand, you could bring this up, align it with the table, level it, and lock everything in place, and it gives you a little bit more support. So anyway, when we're all done with this and I sit down and spend hours and hours of the rest of my night answering questions, I'll put the link for that project in the answer.
All right, thanks, George. So we have two very similar questions, so I'll just kind of combine them into one.
Okay. I was just trying to see if there's anything cool over here to show them while I'm standing there, but that's okay.
Okay.
Carry on.
Yep. So Shane.
My wayward son. Another good son.
Shane and William both are kind of entry-level woodworkers, and they are looking, let's see. William is looking for ideas on a woodworker who wants to work from home, first year, sounds like trying to make a little money. What kind of projects can he do? And Shane has been building bird feeders and picture frames. He's also kind of a newbie woodworker and wants to know what other projects you recommend to help him kind of learn some more skills.
Okay. It's a little hard to answer because there are so many, it depends. A big one would be what tools you have in your shop, because that could limit what projects you're able to do. A good thing to do would be to, generally my advice to people when they want to make a business out of making their woodworking, so this is to the first guys, this is to William, is that everybody who owns a table saw calls themselves a cabinet maker, or in kind of in today's marketplace, everybody with a table saw calls themselves a YouTuber content creator, and they're not all created the same in both cases. So when you want to make money from your woodworking, it's a really good idea to look for something that you can do, something you have that other people in your area don't. So it could be that maybe there's a tool in your shop, maybe it's a CNC machine, it's a laser engraver, and I'm not saying run out and buy this stuff. I'm just giving you examples. So that could be an example where I have this tool that not many people have. Maybe you find a source for a certain wood that's unusual, and you can make stuff out of that wood, but it's not maple, cherry, walnut, pine that everybody's using. So you have a commodity there that not everybody can access. If you really want to start just kind of making stuff and seeing what happens, cutting boards are so easy to make. There's one here. Cutting boards don't take a lot of tools. Everybody likes them, and if you're making them out of wood, they wear out because you cut into them. So it's something that ends up as a commodity that gets replaced. That would be a good choice. We do have, if you want to go an end grain cutting board route, we've got content on WWGOA about making end grain cutting boards. From birdhouses, well, part of the answer is the same. Depends on what tools you have and what interests you. I think that really in both cases, a really important thing is to find a thing that you want to make. And if you're trying to grow your skills, think about being in school where somebody said, you got to learn this thing, and you had zero interest in it. And so you sat in your chair, your desk, bored to tears. Where when there was a topic that really interested you, you probably really went after it. And same with your woodworking. If I say, well, I think you should make cutting boards and I think you should make serving trays and I think you should make end tables, and none of those projects are sexy to you, you're not gonna want to learn that stuff because you don't care. You're not committed is not really the word. You're not invested in the project. So look through IKEA, look through Pinterest, look at projects on GOA, and look for pictures of stuff that you like, and then reverse engineer and figure out what you have to do to make that. And that's going to give you the most growth because you're going to enjoy what you're doing. I'm making a table right now and I'm having a blast because it's something that I really want to make, and it's making that whole process so much more fun.
All right, thank you, George. Todd would like to know how long he should wait after applying the first coat of stain on pine before applying the second coat. He reused the staining pad the next day for coat number 2, and the finish did not come out smooth. He did use a wood conditioner prior to the first coat.
Okay, wood conditioner is a great idea with pine. Nailing down drying time is kind of tough. It depends on your environment. Here I'm in Wisconsin. It's relatively warm in the shop. It's very, very dry. This shop is not humidified. So in the wintertime, stuff dries really fast, almost too fast. If you use, I wonder if the problem isn't using the same staining pad over again, because if you got schmutz on there, if the stain from the day before kind of dried on the pad and then you're dipping it and reapplying, I think there's a good chance you had maybe hard spots in your application pad, and that affected your ability to apply a smooth stain. So that would probably be the first thing. As a rule, if the stain is dry to the touch, you can hit it again. And maybe that's later the same day, maybe that's overnight, maybe that's 2 days later if you live somewhere where the humidity is really high. But if it's dry to the touch and you're still having problems, I would try a clean applicator every time you're putting another coat in.
All right. Bob is from Elk Grove Village.
Elk Grove Village, Illinois, not far from my hometown.
Right. I think that's why it was thrown in there for you.
No, not
right?
North Riverside, Illinois, Bob, is where I grew up.
Right. So Bob loves your live broadcasts. His question is
Trick
this.
another one.
He recently made a fairly large DVD shelf for his son and daughter-in-law out of red oak. He had very specific size limitations to work with, and he finished it with Waxco Danish oil, and being a good woodworker, he finished both sides of every piece. The problem is there was to be a thin 3/16 inch rubber feet on the bottom to keep it off her hardwood floors, but the adhesive feet do not stick to the oil finish. Any suggestions? Is there an adhesive he needs to use, or should he sand off the finish off the bottom to put those feet on there? So
let's back up the truck a little bit because Bob's making a good point. Being a good woodworker, I finish the 2 sides of everything, he said. And it's really, really important, especially when you're working with solid wood. If you're working with man-made materials, plywood, MDF, that kind of stuff, I probably don't care as much that you finish both sides. But anything that's solid wood, you always want to treat both faces the same. It's really easy to get tricked. You make a table, you put a beautiful coat of finish on the top, and you leave the bottom raw. The 2 surfaces are going to take to the environment differently. And that could very well lead to cupping, checking, cracking, all sorts of bad stuff. So great that you did that step. What I would do is take the self-adhesive feet off and dump them, and look for feet that have a little mechanical fastener in the middle of them. So here at Home Depot and Menards is another home center in this area. They've got feet where they're dimpled and then there's a screw or a nail. That's going to give you a mechanical fastener, but it's recessed up in there, so it's not on the hardwood floor. If you're determined to use what you have, I would say, I don't know that you have to. Well, here's what I would do. Right where the thing goes, right where the foot goes, I would clean that up so that you don't have to sand down to raw wood, but I would clean it up a little bit to get some of the finish off. And then you're either going to have to get new feet because you've probably destroyed the adhesive on there, or clean the existing feet with denatured alcohol. No stronger solvent than that. And then silicone caulk is an amazing adhesive. And if you've cleaned up the finished area, cleaned up the bottom of the feet, and put a drop of silicone on there and stick those back on, I bet they'll stay stuck.
Cool. Thanks. Paul says, George, if
I'm going to, one more, 100% silicone, not the silicone mix. It's got to be 100% silicone.
All right. Paul says, George, if I can't afford a bandsaw right now, is a tabletop scroll saw a good alternative?
Two completely different things. So let's do a visual here, Kristen. Let's go this way first, because I think that'll be an easier move for you to point at the scroll saw. I'll roll this out of the way. One way to think about it, sorry, throw me a name again.
Paul.
One way to think about this, Paul, is that scroll saws pick up at the low end in blade size of where bandsaws drop off. So in other words, the biggest blade I can put on a scroll saw is about the smallest blade I can put on a bandsaw. What a bandsaw, and we'll go look at a bandsaw in a second. What a bandsaw offers you is significantly greater thickness capacity. Generally on a scroll saw, the maximum thickness is 2 inches or so. Scroll saws offer you the ability to do super, super fine cuts. You can do pierce cuts, which is because I can remove the blade, put it through a hole in my work, put the blade back in, tighten it back up, and go back to work. We can't do that on a bandsaw. So we're apples to oranges to talk about a scroll saw versus a bandsaw. Can you cut curves with this like you could with a bandsaw? Yeah, so I guess I should have led this with what is it you're fixing to do with this tool. Let's walk over to the bandsaw and we'll do a compare and contrast here. On a bandsaw, generally you'll get, on a lot of saws, you get 6 inches of capacity or more. This one goes up to 13 inches. The blades are bigger, which allows us to cut significantly thicker stock. We have resaw capabilities. We can cut bowl blanks. There's a lot of stuff we can do here. So with your cutting at this stage of the game, if you're talking about cutting stuff this thick, isn't that a beautiful piece of maple burro? That's from a knife handle I'm working on. If you're talking about cutting stuff that thick, yes, a scroll saw would do it. As you start to get up to 3/4 inch stock or greater, yes, a scroll saw will do it, but the feed rate's going to be really, really, really slow. One of the benefits you get from a scroll saw, it's a whole different blade geometry, is you don't typically have to sand the cuts off a scroll saw. They're crazy, crazy smooth. With a bandsaw, you're almost always going to follow a bandsaw cut with a sanding operation. So it could be that handheld jigsaw would be a better choice for you if a good quality handheld jigsaw, if you want to do thicker stock. A jigsaw is not going to do a 4-inch thick bowl blank, but it's going to be a better bandsaw equivalent than a scroll saw will. So you got to think more about what it is you want to do with the tool and go from there.
All right, thanks, George. I can read you this next one if you want to think about it while you walk. Okay.
Sure, or answer it from here.
Maybe. So Harry recently put together an oak coffee table, which required dados at the top of the 4x4 legs, so the 1x6 sides fit into it. Unfortunately, he used a cheaper dado set, and as a result, got rabbets that produced a jagged bottom, possibly because chippers were not matched. Also, the sides that fit into the legs had a slight ridge, about 1/16 of an inch. How do I approach getting the sides flush with the leg? The grain of the leg is perpendicular with the sideboard.
I'm trying to create the image in my head. I'm sorry, but you just got to read the whole thing again.
Okay. So Harry put together a coffee table, which required dados at the top of the 4x4 legs, so the 1/6 sides fit into it. It says 1x6.
1x6.
Yep. Unfortunately, he got some rabbits in his dados.
I don't know, and I don't know what that means.
Okay. It says rabbits that produced a jagged bottom.
Because you either cut dados or you cut rabbits. So I'm confused by that. So I want to try to narrow this down to what the issues are. If the chippers are uneven, so the deal on a dado set is that you've got rim blades on the outside and chippers in the middle. And everything needs to be exactly the same diameter. If anything is a little bit big or a little bit small, you'll have high spots in the bottom of a dado or a rabbit. So if it's not going to show, possibly you have a structure issue there because we're not getting the glue bond we want, because instead of the dado being nice and flat on the bottom and receiving the mating piece, if it's a little bit ridged, you maybe won't have a good glue bond. If it's buried, if the dado is completely buried and you don't care about the cosmetic fact that it's uneven on the bottom, I wouldn't worry about it too much. So what was the tail end of this? How do I get it to fit?
How do I approach getting the sides flush with the leg?
Sides flush.
The grade on the leg is perpendicular with the sides.
Well, the leg's got to be going up and down. So a leg like this, so it leaves me with the impression then that the rabbit or dado is not cut deeply enough. If it's not, if the rail, if what he's calling the side is a rail going up against the leg, it's not cut deeply enough, hand chisel and work on it from there. Set up your dado again and cut everything a little bit deeper. I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm visualizing the problem here great. But if the rail is standing proud, if the side is standing proud of the leg, it sounds like you either got to make the side thinner, run it through a planer, or you got to make the dado or rabbit deeper in order to accept it. And you could do that by hand, or you could do it by remachining it.
Okay, thanks, George. We may as well do this one here because you're close to the camera. Okay, so Sam asks, what is that charm on your necklace? It's kind of hard to make out, and I'm just curious. So you're close enough that you can
it's a great question. So I'll do this. I get asked this every once in a while, and in fact, the last video shoot, we shot a little clip on this because of the frequency with which I get asked. So commonly it's inside my shirt, but every once in a while it sneaks out. So I was in Africa for 3 years with Peace Corps teaching woodworking in a rural high school, and hitchhiking somewhere one day, and in the back of a pickup truck, riding with a bunch of host country nationals, and this young kid was talking to me about where I was going and what I was doing and that kind of stuff. And I suppose at that point I'd been in Africa. I was in Swaziland, Africa. I suppose I'd been there for maybe a year or two already. And he said, "Oh, sir, you really must have a lion's tooth." And well, what's the deal with a lion's tooth? Lion's tooth is good luck for travelers. If you have a lion's tooth, then nothing bad will ever happen to you when you travel. So the next time at a game park where this was legally obtained, it was purchased from the gift shop at a game park. They called a lion out, or whatever happened to the lion. I bought a lion's tooth. The beads that are on here with it, what we here would call a witch doctor, in Swaziland they call a sangoma, traditional healer. And for the traditional healers, beads and colors are really, really important. And red is the color that they feel most closely ties a person to their ancestors. So these glass beads, the top ones are red, and then the next ones are red and white. I bought those in Durban, South Africa, put them on this necklace along with the lion's tooth, and have been wearing it ever since. And ever since is got back from Africa in 1992. So somebody can do the math in their head. I've been wearing this for a bunch of years. The linen string has been replaced a number of times, but incredibly, it's still the tooth, and it's still the same beads that I put on there in Swaziland a bunch of years ago. And I feel like someday it will get lost. If the string breaks or something, I'll be in trouble. And if that happens, I will cry. It'll be a very bad day. But thanks for asking, and it's a very cool memento of being in Africa.
By the way, that's 25 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
A quarter of a century.
Oh, wow. All right. So I'm here with George Vondriska, the managing editor of Woodworkers Guild of
And
America.
Sheba, the whining dog.
Yep.
Come on.
Here to answer your questions.
Good.
Post them right on in there. We'll answer them.
Good girl.
If you haven't signed up for the free newsletter, go out to WWGOA.com and do so. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also thanks to Typebond, who is actually sponsoring today's live feed.
Yep.
And that brings me right to my next question from Phil.
It's a sticky question?
Yeah, will Typebond glue work on wood that has been stained?
No.
Okay.
You can't put any glue on a finished wood. You're gonna have to get the finish off. And in the perfect world, right down to raw wood is the best way to be 100% sure that an adhesive is going to grab.
Okay, thank you. Edward asks, is cedar the only wood to use outdoor without treatment?
No. Oh, you want me to elaborate?
Yeah, please.
A little Googling would help you here, but off the top of my head, cedar, white oak, mahogany, Jarrah is either Australian or New Zealand wood. I can't remember, but it's also naturally water resistant and really, 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 really pretty. Ipe, I-P-E is the way that's spelled, can be outside without any treatment at all. Pressure treated lumber can be outside. Probably not what you were thinking. But there's what I named 6 or 7. So there are a number of other woods out there that you can make outdoor furniture and never put a drop of finish on them, and they're going to be just fine.
All right.
Redwood is another one.
Thanks, George. Ed says, should a home woodworker hobbyist worry about whether a drill driver is, well, say that 5 times fast, drill driver. No, don't really.
Red Room. One of the best movies ever made.
Whether a drill driver is brushed or not brushed, the newest drill drivers are coming out brushless, but there are some good buys on brushed drill drivers.
Yeah, I don't know, Ed. It's the latest thing you see everywhere is this brushless, cordless tool technology. And honestly, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I'm not well versed in it enough to know. I bet I'll learn more after I go to the big. It's Sheba sitting over by the door like she wants to leave right now. You got half an hour to go, dog. So give it up. I was going to say I'll probably know a lot more after AWFS in Las Vegas because I bet there'll be way more brushless tools, and I'll get educated, and then I'll come back and let you know. But I don't know what the big benefit is. Power, longevity, all of the above. I don't know.
George wants to know. He has
Good name.
Yeah, he has a ton of redwood, mostly heartwood, right? Looks like 2x4s and 4x4s.
Nice, lucky problem.
Any suggestions on what's a good project for that type of wood?
Outdoor stuff. Planters, Adirondack chairs. First Adirondack chairs I ever made were redwood, and it's actually the same design I'm using today, which is a plan that's available on WWGOA. Interestingly enough, the only problem with them was redwood is such a light wood that if the wind would blow relatively significantly, the Adirondack chairs would tumble like Texas tumbleweed. They would roll across the lawn because the chairs were so light. But it was beautiful stuff, all clear. It was really, really amazing.
Okay. Fred wants to know, can solid wood be used for fret work? How thin can it be and still not warp? He's making an African mahogany grandfather clock, which would be awesome to see those pictures.
Yeah, love to see that when it's done. So by fret work, what he means is not frets on a guitar, unfortunately, because that would be way more interesting to me. Fret work is like scroll work, real fine, delicate scroll work. And I don't think I want to answer the question because I don't want to mislead you. I own a scroll saw. I used it every once in a while, but I'm not a huge scroll saw guy. I have machined woods to very, very, very thin pieces successfully. Part of the key to that is when you do machine stuff from thick to thin, to take equal amounts from both sides. And what can happen in a drying process is that if something isn't dried really, really well, if it's not handled perfectly, you can have a different moisture content on the outside of the material from the inside. So if you're only planing from one face, maybe you've experienced this, you take all the wood off one face, you set the piece down, you come back the next day and it's cut. And it's because you removed this dry material from this face, got it down to a different moisture content. The other face is still its original moisture content. So always planing, flipping, planing, flipping, planing, flipping is the way to go as you're reducing thickness. But I would actually explore this a lot more on some kind of scroll saw forum. PS Wood is, in addition to Timberwolf blades, they make a scroll saw, they sell scroll saw blades, and they're very, very knowledgeable there. Barbara Peters is quite the accomplished scroll sawer. And if she can't answer that question, she could probably point you in the direction. When I sit down and answer these questions at the end, I'll put the PS Wood webpage link in the answer.
All right, thanks, George.
They're a great resource.
Kevin wants to know, do you have a recommendation on the best router and table combination for beginners?
Well, this is hard because tool recommendations are always hard, because if you have a good quality tool, it's going to be more pleasant and probably easier to use. However, you're ponying up more money on maybe on a hobby you're not 100% committed to yet, or you don't really know where it's going to go. So let me say a couple things. The Triton plunge routers have a lot of amazing router table features built right into them. If you have a Triton router hanging in your table, you don't need a router lift. It's built into that. It's built into the plunge mechanism to allow you to access it from above. That's really, really cool. And it's got other stuff going on as well. So I would consider looking at Triton. Then there are a lot of good routers out there. Milwaukee, in this shop, I've got a Porter cable and a router table. I've got a Milwaukee and a router table, and I've got a DeWalt and a router table. I got to think a second. The Porter cable 890 offers an above the table adjustment. The Milwaukee router, can't remember the model number, offers an above the table adjustment. Not quite as advanced maybe as the Triton system is, but it's there. For router tables, when we looked earlier at the benchtop unit over there, that's a Craig benchtop table sitting on that benchtop stand that I had made. That Craig table is really nice, either their benchtop or their full-size one. And I recognize a good router table is really expensive. You can spend $500 just like that. But it's such a diverse tool. It's such a, there's so many things you can do on a router table. It's worth having a good one. But the Craig benchtop is a great one. Woodpecker makes really good quality products. So little shopping around and find something that fits your price point, fits your checkbook.
All right. Ken has a 14-inch bandsaw, and he would like to do a lot of resawing of 8 to 10-inch tall stock to a 1/2 inch or 1/16 inch widths. Okay.
If it's, I'm going to go on what, I'm going to reference the PS Wood people again, who sell Timberwolf blades. If you're cutting dry wood, they recommend a 1/2 inch wide blade. And if you're cutting green wood, I think they recommend a 3/4 inch blade. Generally 3 to 4 teeth per inch. So you're doing a rip cut on a resaw. So as a result, you want to have big teeth. You want to have big gullets. And the gullet is just the fancy name for the valley between the teeth. You want to have big gullets that can carry the waste out. That's why a 4-tooth per inch blade will work. But I'll say again, you can call PS Wood, and I'm not trying to do an ad for them. I've been using Timberwolf blades a long time. I know PS Wood is a great resource. You can call them, you can say what kind of bandsaw you have. You can tell them what kind of stuff you're going to cut, and they will give you a blade recommendation that really zeroes it in. But as a general rule, resawing, 1/2 inch wide, 3 to 4 teeth per inch, and you're in dry stock, in dry wood, then you should be okay.
Okay, thanks, George. Katie wants to know, will you be offering any classes at your shop? I missed your last bowl turning class. Bummer. Where do I sign up?
Yes, Katie is the answer. You can do, the easiest way to do this is go to my shop's website, which is vondriskawoodworks.com. And when you get on there, in the banner across the top, one of the menus is classes. And when you click on that, the schedule for about the next 4 months or so has been posted. I know that there are a couple of bowl turning classes on there. Too bad you missed the last one. It was a blast. So it's pretty cool. And there's some stuff on my Instagram page if you want to see it. When bowl turning is happening in here, right in this space that we're standing in, there were 8 lathes set up, a student at every lathe. Everybody's turning their own bowls. It's really a lot of fun. The bowl turning class is 4 hours long. So look on there. And then one of the more interesting things that's coming up in April for a class is a make your own longbow class. If I get a stool, you do a commercial quickly, Krista.
All right. Well, I was here with George Vondriska, the managing editor of Woodworking North America. He's actually over there. We're answering your live questions. We're getting as many done as we can. If we don't get to them, George will answer all of them after we're done tonight. And if you don't get the newsletter, go out to WWGOA.com, sign up. It's completely free. You'll get lots of good material every single month. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks to Tight Bond.
April, there's a bow making class. The instructor's coming in from Boise. This is the longbow I made in 2011 when I took the class. So let me, it's pretty cool stuff. Yellow heart bellywood, bamboo out here. Tom Turgeon is the instructor. Really nice guy, really a good teacher. Everybody starts with a stave and you hand shape it in order to get it, as Tom says, in order to teach the wood to bend. It's really an amazing process. This ended up about a 45-pound longbow, 45-pound draw at 28 inches. And in this state, that's enough of a bow to deer hunt with. It's a really cool process, really, really cool. So look at the calendar on vondriskawoodworks.com and go from there.
Thanks, George. Tim says, I have neither the money nor the space for a jump sander. He's been toying with the idea of using an inline sander like body shops use for flattening door panels and tabletops. What are your thoughts on that?
That's interesting. An inline sander, a lot of them are pneumatic, a lot of them are air driven, and it's a long skinny thing, and it does this. I think that would have a chance to flatten panels. I mean, I didn't have a sander for the longest time, and I would plane narrow stock, so I had a planer, and then when I glue it together carefully to keep the surfaces aligned, and then from there I just handled it with a random orbit sander. So the larger the better on a random orbit. You're going to want a 6, not a 5-inch if you're doing large surfaces. So I think that's very doable. I'm not convinced you got to go to an inline sander. A couple companies still make belt sanders. A lot of companies have gotten out of the belt sander business, but Porter Cable, Triton, I was just looking at them, Makita, Rigid, I would probably do a belt sander, random orbit combination prior to doing the inline sander or inline sander option.
Okay. Jim says, where can I get an angle gauge like you use to set the grinder tool rest in your sharpening video?
That was a WorkSharp product.
WorkSharp? So he can go to worksharp.com or something?
Let me think a second. I want to make sure. It depends kind of on what we're talking about. There have been a few videos. So if it's the video, in which I'm using a Worksharp 3000, there is a gauge that I poke the chisel into, and that tells me if the bevel on that chisel is already at 25 degrees or 30 degrees. That's a Worksharp product. It's an accessory that you can get from Worksharp. If it's let me see if this is right. Oh, it's not. It's way at the other end of the shop. There's a gauge I use when I'm putting I'm about to put a chisel onto a whetstone, and it's in a sharpening guide. And there's a gauge I use to project the chisel out just the right amount to make sure it's set for the correct angle. That's a Trend product. When I answer this question after the fact, pointing to my office, I'll source both of those items in the answer.
Okay, thanks, George. Stephen, all the way from Melbourne,
Australia.
Yep, nice.
I'd say good day, mate, but it's so cliche.
Stuff.
You know.
He would like to know what types of timber can he use to make a cutting board, something easy to work with and stable.
Well, what do you have in Australia? Eucalyptus, right? A lot of eucalyptus down there. That would be good. I could identify woods for you here in North America, but what you're looking for is hard and close grained. So woods here, the usual suspects: walnut, maple, cherry, not red oak, not pine. Pine's too soft, oak is too porous. In the world of tropicals, sapele is a great choice. Jatoba, Jara, gum or eucalyptus, which I think you have a lot of in Australia, would be a good choice. But yeah, shop characteristics more than name. Close grained and hard is what you're looking for.
All right, Dennis wants to know, he's got a ton of older Hargrave bar clamps. Is it worth the investment?
Older what?
Hargrave bar clamps?
It's a brand, like as though it's a brand?
I think it's a brand.
Hargrave?
Yeah, Hargrave.
Okay.
Bar clamps. Is it worth the investment to add the new parallel clamps to his shop, and what is the advantage?
Yeah, this is a great visual. I'll just run and get it. So tell them we're sponsored by Type On, and they do cool stuff and do a box director.
Well, tonight's live is sponsored by Type On. They have a ton of glue. George talks about the wonders of Type On glue all the time, particularly Type On number 3.
Type On 3 is waterproof.
Type On 3
you can build a boat with Type On 3.
It's waterproof versus water resistant.
Versus Type On 2 is water resistant. All right. Very standard pipe clamp. I, along with many woodworkers, own 8 billion of these things. There's good news and there's bad news. When we use the glue itself will release the black. The acid in the glue will release the black. It'll migrate into your project. So you've got to be really careful about that. Maybe masking tape or something on the pipe to prevent that from happening. Bigger problem is doing an edge-to-edge glue up. When we put pressure on with these pads, a lot of times they cock. And that can lead to the glue up coming out less than perfectly flat. And after the glue is dry, we have to deal with that. So for me, back in the day when I first opened my school, I was taking on custom work as well. And if I had to do 20 kitchen doors, even though I owned a boatload of pipe clamps, I would glue them together one door at a time because I owned one set of parallel jaw clamps. With a parallel jaw clamp, what we get is the beam or bar is dead flat. Regardless of how much pressure we put on these jaws, they stay parallel to each other, hence the name. This particular one is a Bessie brand. Jorgensen is a company, Jet makes them. A handful of other companies make parallel jaw clamps. So the downside is these clamps, parallel jaws, are about $1 an inch. So this is about a $30 clamp. This is probably a $15 clamp, but you get what you pay for. I definitely think it's worth having. I would start with 2 of these, and I think a 30-inch length is a pretty good place to start. And then keep putting them on your birthday and Christmas list. And as time goes on, just keep adding a little bit and a little bit and a little bit until you have more of them. Today, if I'm reaching for a clamp on an edge-to-edge glue up or a door, it's always going to be a set of parallel jaw clamps.
All right. Bob would like to know, what adhesive would you recommend for gluing wood veneer to sheet metal? This is so cool. He's making a little pedal car for his granddaughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I had a pedal car when I was a kid. I wonder where that is today. It's probably worth $3,000. Boy, I don't know. I think that a good contact adhesive would stick to sheet metal. Sorry, I gotta do a wash down here. Still not quite ready. Okay. Here's what I would do. I would go to a home center or a woodworking store or someplace that sells contact adhesive, or Google it, find a manufacturer, and then call their customer service line and describe to them what you're doing. I think that back in the day, I was a production manager of a commercial cabinet shop, and we made all the cabinets for Old Navy stores east of the Mississippi River. And the countertops in those stores were galvanized metal. The cabinets were particle board. And we would glue those metal countertops down with contact to cement. Have I been saying construction adhesive? That's not what I meant. With contact cement. So same stuff that we put plastic laminate on, we would spray on the bottom of the sheet metal, stick it down, and it worked just fine. So I would find a contact cement manufacturer, call their 800 number, tell them exactly what you're doing, and double check with them. But I think contact adhesive would do it.
All right. We actually only have like 10 minutes left. Wow.
We have to do the where everybody's watching from question. So please, in the comments, let us know where you're watching from. All right.
Oh, by the way, James added to his comment, the gauge he was referring to earlier is the gauge you put against the grinder wheel and set the angle of the tool rest to get the chisel at 25 or 30 degrees for grinding the bevel.
I don't know. I'm blanking on. It sounds like it's on a grinder, not the work sharp. So James, if you're still watching, and you can for sure clarify, is it something I did on the low RPM grinder over here, or is it something I did on a work sharp? That'll help me focus.
Okay. So Kelly lives in Canada. The shop's in the backyard with a wood stove in it. It gets very cold in Canada, right? So Kelly has forgot that she or he store a bunch of wood in the shop, right? And is wondering if there's going to be issues with wood movement because of the hot, cold, hot, cold.
Well, maybe. It'd be better to be all one or all the other, not constantly going back and forth. But if you can't keep the shop warm all the time, then you can't keep the shop all the time. Here's what I would suggest. If you can move the material to someplace where it will always be in the same, it'll always be warm or it will always be cold, and then take it to the shop as needed, I think that's going to give you I think that's a better solution, rather than having it constantly cycle up.
Okay, thanks. Jeannie says, I love my Makita compound sliding miter saw. Jeannie hates the poor dust collection. Anyway,
that sucks.
And insert drums, right? Or whatever, cymbals. Okay. Any way to catch all the stuff that goes flying that doesn't make it into the shop vac?
You could do, if you go on the FastCap website, when I answer the question, I'll put the link in the thing. They have a huge hood. And if you're willing to have that hood behind your saw, it's amazing. That really catches a lot of stuff. But this is not the first rodeo for miter saws that have bad dust collection. A lot of woodworkers will simply build a parachute type shroud out of wood behind their miter saw. And if you've got dust collection in your shop and you can run a port into the back of that and just let it run so you get some airflow going in there, that's a pretty common solution. And we don't have anything like that as far as a project plan on GOA. But I think a little Googling and you would find a lot of those kind of shrouds out there. But I'll source that FastCap hood, assuming they still make it. I'll source that FastCap hood for you. It's really cool.
All right, thanks, George. Paul wants to know, what is your recommendation to purchase the best 12, I'm assuming it's supposed to be 12-inch sliding miter saw? Is it the Festool Capex?
Well, that's a 10, not a 12.
Well, the Festool Capex 120 or the Bosch Dual Bevel Glider GCM 12 SD or the DeWalt DWS 780.
And I'll take that back. Maybe Festool has this in a 12, so and then I just haven't seen. Well, so a couple things. I've got here Festool Capex 10-inch. I'm really, really happy with. I've been using it for years. I've also got the Bosch Mitered Glide saw. Very happy with that. Both of those saws are built such that they have a really small front to back footprint. And I think that can be a really big deal. In this shop, my miter stand is a freestanding thing, but for a lot of woodworkers, they're pushing this up against the wall. And a lot of sliders have bars on them that are this long. And as a result, you have to have that much clearance behind the saw when you're making a cut. So those shorter footprint saws are cool because you don't have to have a 36-inch deep bench to put them on. The DeWalt saw, we do have a review of a DeWalt saw. I'm not sure it's the model number you asked about, but on WWGOA, there's a review, and I will put the link in the answer to the question, that David Radke did on a DeWalt saw. I know he really liked that saw. And so go from there. So my personal experience with the Bosch and the Festool has been great. And then you can look at David's experience with the DeWalt. Hello, Don.
All right, you want to do one more? Yeah, 3 minutes.
Sure, let's see what happens. Come
on. Johnny says, my neighbor says his router table has a pin to start the cuts.
It's called, ironically enough, a starter pin.
It doesn't make much sense to Johnny because he feels that the pin would be in the way. What do you know about this? What is it for?
Well, let's walk over to the router table. That's a great question, Johnny. Let me manage cords a little bit here.
And while we're walking, you know, we have lots of viewers from all over, a lot from Australia and Canada today.
You know why? Because one of our contributing editors, AJ, is in Australia. So he's probably down there really talking up the live event and getting a lot of people to watch. All right, so here's
where do we need to be?
Here's the deal. Well, you're gonna stay where you is for now. I'm gonna quickly. Yeah, this will be our last question because it's going to take me a second to make that.
We have someone that says they're watching from the bush in Australia.
Nice.
Yeah.
How?
I don't know. Wi-Fi maybe.
Right. I just got to find my starter pin. All right, Chris, I think if you can come in and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna mess with the camera. Elevate. Oops. All right. So that as much as possible, you can be looking down at this.
Oops.
I know. So a starter pin is this device, and it's going to thread into the insert, and not in the way because it threads in and it threads out, so we can remove it when we don't need it. If I'm doing something that's straight, that's a round over in there right now, router's unplugged so I can mess with it. If I'm going to do that straight edge, I'm going to incorporate the fence into my work, and I'm going to ride that edge into the router bit like that. If, however, I want to cut this curved edge, the problem with a curve is that you're just coming in from space. And if I approach like this, it's really easy for the router bit to catch that corner and do this. And because of the RPM, 23,000 RPM, sharp cutter, it's very difficult for your hand to overcome this. It's really bad if your finger comes around and engages the cutter, of course. So the starter pin goes here, and if you're router table shopping, you really want your table to have this. What happens here is my fence is just a little bit in my way. There goes a router wrench. I start on the pin. I got to move my fence just a little bit. All right. I start on the pin, and that gives me kind of a fence to be on when I'm going to come in and engage the cutter, instead of just coming in floating like this and trying to engage. So it gives me more leverage and way better control to then get on the bearing. Once that happens, once I'm on the bearing, then I'll come off the pin and just ride the bearing. And of course, this skinny piece I would not be doing with my hand. I'd have a push pad. But once I'm on the cutter, then I'll just ride the bearing for the rest of the cut. So the starter pin is really, really valuable if you're going to ever route a curve like I'm showing here.
Cool. All right, well, now we're going to be like way high. Sorry.
Are we closing from here? Is it 8 bells? Sam, what do you say? We'll close from the standard station.
And remember, if we didn't get to your question live, like on air, George literally is going to go right through that door behind him right now, as soon as we log off, and answer your questions and timestamp everything, because all of these are archived, so you can even go back tomorrow and watch it, or next week, or whatever.
Time and time again. Yeah. So before we close, a couple things. Let's see, I got to get my thoughts organized here. In March, I talked previously about being at the Woodworking show in Milwaukee. That has become tentative because last I heard, there were some questions about the venue in Milwaukee. So if you're looking for my teaching stuff on the road, be a little bit careful with that March show in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because it may or may not be happening. And thanks to everybody who came to Columbus. That was a blast out there. Then March, April. In April, I'm at Champaign, Illinois at the CU Wood Shop. So you can look for CU Woodshop is their .com is their web address. And I'm doing cabinet making, CNC work, and a couple other classes down there. April. May is Weekend with Wood. I will be in Des Moines teaching in at the Wood Magazine event. June, I think I'm somewhere, but I can't remember where. July, I'm not teaching because I'm going to Philmont, New Mexico for 10 days with Boy Scouts. And then it'll be August, and we'll see what's happening by then. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Krista for running the camera, Sam for all her behind-the-scenes work, and thanks again to Tightbond, who is helping to sponsor this event so that we can bring you live. You look like you got something to say.
Yep, our next live is Thursday, March 9th.
Thursday, March 9th is the next live, 7 p.m. Central Time. Mm-hmm. So that's it for us. And I'd have Sheba say goodbye, but she's so anxious to get out of here. She's waiting by the door. So that's it. See you next time.